Hey friends, today I'm going to read a story from an area that we don't talk about very much. This story is called The Moose of Ewenki, and takes place in Mongolia, in Inner Mongolia, which is in between Russia and China, and it's a landlocked country. And the author goes by the name of Blackcrane, and he is actually from Mongolia. And the illustrator, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but it looks like Jiu Er, and she is from China. And this is a traditional tale that the Ewenki people tell, and they say it's based on a true story. I'm not sure how true it is, but it's a kind of a fun story. And look at that moose. Isn't he beautiful? See if you can see it better. And I just love these illustrations. I just think they're really beautiful. So let's see what happens. And if you don't know where Mongolia is, I suggest you look it up online or get an atlas and see if you can find it. The Moose of Ewenki. And you can see somebody right in there. The reindeer Ewenki people live in the vast forest of the greater Hingan Mountains in northern China. They hunt and raise reindeer. Now, you know I like to tell stories when I read. So my cousin, his name is Aude, he has a television show on National Geographic, and it's called Survive the Tribe or Primal Survivor. They're two different shows. And he goes and lives with people and learns their way of life. And so he went to live in Mongolia, and he lived with the people, and he actually lived with people who, in a different area, and he lived with some people who use falcons for hunting. And it was a very interesting show. So maybe sometime you can find it. It's on the National Geographic channel. And if you're interested, I can give you a little more information. And I have a helper today reading. This is my cat, Rocky. On one of his hunting trips, the old hunter Gerelchimeg lay in ambush all night long. He shot a moose. A moose is a beautiful animal, and it's hard to imagine someone killing one, but this is a very different time, and they live really honestly in the middle of nowhere, and they have to kill all their own food to survive. And so they're very respectful, and they only kill what they need, and they use everything. They don't waste anything. Gerelchimeg sat down to rest when he suddenly heard something nestling in the shrub behind him. That's the picture that was at the beginning of the book. Can you see who that is? A baby animal looked out, trembling with fear. With its fiery fur, the little thing looked like it was the rising sun over the mountains. Gerelchimeg realized it was a little moose. The hunting dog barked and growled, but Gerelchimeg told him to be quiet and held him back. Slowly the little moose came over and licked Gerelchimeg's fingers. The old man felt terrible because reindeer Ewenki hunters would never ever hunt a female moose who was raising a baby. When he had shot her, he hadn't seen the baby moose lurking in the shrub, and it wasn't the normal season for a baby. So he accidentally killed the mother, and now the moose is an orphan, and the baby moose will not survive on its own without its mother. The motherless baby followed Gerelchimeg all the way back to the campsite. He was not afraid of people. He followed Gerelchimeg into his tent and fell asleep in no time beside the stove. Exhausted, Gerelchimeg also fell sound asleep and escaped into his dreams. He was awakened by a sudden bang. The little moose had knocked down the food shelf. So their homes are very similar to Native American homes, where they use sticks and they kind of build them like this in a circular formation, and then they cover them with maybe skins or bark. The little moose was so hungry that he was searching for food all around the tent. Gerelchimeg found a bottle of reindeer milk. He rarely used it unless he wanted some milk for his tea, and it had almost fermented into chunks by now. But he dipped a finger into the bottle and fed the little moose. Quickly, the baby licked it all up. But he was still hungry. He stumbled around in the dark tent looking for something to eat. The rice and flour were soon gone. He even tried to eat the candle, and he kept Gerelchimeg awake the whole night. I mean, a baby moose It's probably already about, I don't know, maybe this big, and they must eat a lot because you know how a moose are huge, huge animals. I don't know if I show that to you. The illustrations are really beautiful. The next day, the little moose began his new life at the campsite. He learned to drink reindeer milk and eat rice, and even grew fond of bread. He liked all kinds of human food in his belly, and he never seemed to be full. Gerelchimeg named him Chow Han, which means little moose. A moose for a pet would be kind of an interesting thing, wouldn't it? Chow Han grew and grew, and before long he was as big as an adult reindeer. So they keep reindeer for food and to use their skins, and sometimes they even use them for transportation. A little bit of you can see the edge of the house a little bit, and here a little bit better so you can get an idea of what it looks like, the tent that he sleeps in. But he didn't seem to know how big he was. He played outside all day long, but still came in the tent to sleep. Chow Han couldn't even turn around in there, so one day he knocked the whole thing down. Gerelchimeg had no choice but to kick him out. He's getting pretty big, isn't he? Maybe he thinks he's his mom. Chow Han followed Gerelchimeg everywhere he went, all day long. He was curious about everything. At the campsite at night, he slept with all the reindeer, all huddled together on the ground. Gerelchimeg lit a fire and burned incense to keep away the mosquitoes that tormented the animals. Let's see, where is he? I don't even see him in this page. Oh, here he is, sorry. There he is. Look how big he's getting now, and he's sleeping with all the reindeer. He's probably confused. He probably doesn't even know he's a moose. As he grew older, Chow Han went into the forest with the reindeers to search for something to eat. Living with the reindeer pack, he thought that he was a reindeer too. Oh, here he is, way over here. He's going to be a lot bigger than a reindeer. When summer came, Chow Han began to look for food in streams and ponds. He ate water lilies, cattails, and duckweed. Now look how big he is. And actually a moose can be very, very dangerous, but since he's been raised in a village and with people, he has no idea that he's so big, and he's not mean at all. Gerelchimeg kept on calling him Chow Han, little moose, even when he had grown into a giant. In the season when the reindeer were competing for females with whom to mate, the male reindeer began to challenge Chow Han to fight, but he was so strong that he won every single struggle. Look how big he is. He probably has no idea why they're trying to fight him. While Chow Han was growing into an adult, his friend Gerelchimeg was getting older and older. It was harder for him to bear the harsh life of the reindeer campsite. One autumn, he sprained his foot while he was searching for the herd. Gerelchimeg's foot had to be treated in the, I'm not sure how to say this, Aude village at the bottom of the mountain. Chow Han, who had never left Gerelchimeg's side, followed him all the way down to the settlement. See, he's using a reindeer for transportation. Gerelchimeg had to lock Chow Han up in the courtyard, but there was nothing for him to do there. He was used to life in the wild, and one day he pushed through the fence. The village dogs went crazy at the sight of him, for the moose were wild animals that had been hunted by the reindeer Ewenki people for generations. But now suddenly there was a moose in their village, so they attacked him. But Chow Han was a giant and very powerful, though he didn't seem to know how strong he really was. He tossed the dogs around like leaves blown by a crazy wind. He's got those big antlers. The human world was full of temptations for Chow Han. He pushed into an unlocked warehouse and stole many, many bean cakes and drank a great deal of water. The bean cake swelled in his belly until it looked like a drum. So he's not feeling very well. And actually, something like that can kill a large animal like that. It can get all their intestines twisted up and kill them. So here he is, walking with Gerelchimeg. He's walking, trying to get everything moving in his system. Gerelchimeg led Chow Han around all night long. At dawn, with a huge plop, Chow Han finally rid himself of the bean cakes. So he pooped it all out. The human world was also filled with danger for Chow Han. Some of the Aluguya, sorry, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, village wanted to kidnap him and sell him to the zoo in the nearby city. They lured him with a noose using carrots, but Chow Han was so strong that he knocked over all the kidnappers and almost tipped the truck over before coming home to Gerelchimeg. Well, I'm glad he got away. Gerelchimeg knew in his heart that Chow Han would never get used to the human world in the village, so he brought him back up the mountain to the reindeer campsite. But Gerelchimeg was growing weaker and weaker. So that's kind of sad because since he was raised by a human, he's not really used to being a wild animal, and now it looks like as the man who takes care of him, Gerelchimeg, is getting older, he might pass away, and then the moose is not going to have anyone to care for him. One morning, he took Chow Han into the wildest part of the forest. Aren't the pictures beautiful? He tried to drive Chow Han away by hitting and pushing him. He tried everything he could think of, but Chow Han wouldn't budge. It had been 6 years since the morning when Gerelchimeg had first brought Chow Han to the campsite. The moose had never left his side since then. But now Gerelchimeg had no choice other than to give him back to the forest. Eventually, he shot at the ground beside Chow Han. The stones bounced up and hit Chow Han on the nose. In pain, Chow Han finally ran off into the depths of the forest, leaving a sad Gerelchimeg behind. He returned alone to the reindeer camp that had emptied for the season. So he feels really bad because he feels like he had to be mean to the moose to make him go away, but that's the only way the moose will be safe, because if he stays around the campsite, eventually someone's going to shoot him. One late autumn day, fierce winds rose up from all directions and blew the roofs off of houses and tore up huge trees in the Aluguya village. Some young hunters from the village rushed up to the reindeer campsite on the mountainside to see how Gerelchimeg was faring, only to find that he had been dead for a long time. They buried Gerelchimeg on the high slopes in hopes that his soul would go with the wind. His hunting dog insisted on staying behind to guard his master. The young hunters drove the pack of reindeer away from the campsite and never set foot in that part of the forest ever again. Years later, a poacher is someone who tries to kill animals when they're not supposed to. Like here in the United States, there are seasons where you can hunt certain animals and you're not allowed to do it at other times. And if you do, you're interrupting you're really messing with the ecosystem, and you're interrupting their life cycle. So there are only certain times that you're allowed to hunt. And so a poacher is someone who hunts whenever they feel like it. Hoping to hunt some wild reindeer, he saw a towering shadow of a giant moose far in the distance. He was so frightened that he shot all the bullets in his gun at the moose, but they missed, luckily. The moose rushed at him and, tossing his antlers, threw him far into the bush. From then on, no one ever dared to enter that forest again. Let's look how big he is. The reindeer Ewenki people still tell each other that up on the mountain there lives a giant moose. He's guarding the vast forest, and Gerelchimeg, his dead hunter. I'm going to open this so you can see the whole thing. And there he is. Isn't he beautiful? I mean, he's gigantic. Now, I picked this book because Mongolia is not a country you hear of very often, and this tale is supposedly based on a true story, but it's a story that the Ewenki people tell passed down. It's a story they've passed down and tell. And I just think it's very interesting to read about different cultures. There's so many fascinating people in the world that are so different from what your life is and what you're used to. It's really important to learn about them and to respect their way of life and just to see what else is out there in the world. So I thought it was really interesting. I hope you get a chance to look on a map and find Mongolia. And I have seen several moose. I saw a bunch when I went to New Hampshire one time, and that was incredible. And then I also saw some when I was in Canada one time. So have you ever seen a real moose? And if you haven't, what wild animals have you seen? Happy reading, friends.